Hello retro fans! You may wonder why this is so dark and why there are just some bluish LEDs. This is because today I'm going to present a project I have worked for quite a while, and what I was going to say, a project I have finished about more than a year ago, or almost a year ago. And this is probably one of the most ambitious projects ever. As you can see, this is not a normal C64 case. This is a special case made as well by plexilaser.de. I'm going to post a link in the description section. And it's obviously it's transparent, and it's a case for even the older boards, but we are using this case for the older boards with a short board because we want to enable the whole board to be in view while mounted in the case, because we've spent so much time thinking about things we could change on the board, and I actually changed things on the board, which we're going to talk about later, that it really deserves some better presentation than using a short version of this case. And basically what you can see, this case is lit by blue LED strips just all around, and we got some additional LEDs on the board, and that's basically the one most obvious feature we can see here right now. And basically I got this back because we're going to change a couple of things, not because they are not working, but the best is the enemy of the good, as usual. We really want to add some additional things, and we want to improve a couple of things as well. So basically I'm going to guide you through the main features we can use while the case is still closed, because there's already some functionality which is not normal for a standard C64. And the most important thing is that many of the features here are controllable by keyboard, because we build in a so-called Keyman 64. That's a project of Henning Beagle from the Forum 64. And we combined this with the Overlay 64 to have some visual feedback on the screen. And I'm going to show you how this is going to look like. So basically that's a standard C64 screen, but by pressing so-called hotkey, which is the left pointed arrow here, we can, for example, switch on and off the light. So if you don't want to have some light because, I don't know, you don't like the color, I don't know, then you can switch it on and off. Then we can perform a reset, for example. And then we can dig a little bit deeper. What you can perhaps see a little bit is that we build in a Mixsid. That's a twin SID adapter for the C64. And in this case, it's hosting two different SIDs. The old 6581 and the newer 8580. With the hotkey M, we can change the configuration of the Mixsid, and it basically has two operation modes. One is parallel mode and one is a stereo mode. And in parallel mode, we really can just say that we want to have one SID on both audio channels, and here we can decide whether we want to have the 6581 or the 8580. And both are playing the very same stuff. And in stereo mode, we have the opportunity to set the second SID to a different address to have a real either 6 voice output or a stereo output, depending on the SID title you're going to play. And we can change the configuration here as well between 6581 on the left and on the right, and 8580 to vice versa. And we can change the addresses here as well. So depending what your preference is or what the music is requiring, you can simply change this while using the hotkeys. And I have built in a help page to explain all the features we got here in this C64 It's in German, so I'm just going through the lines step by step. So the first 4 lines about the Mixsid controls, as I said already, changing between parallel and stereo mode, priority mode, which SID is the first one, and by pressing 1 we change the address of the SIDs, and second key is the mix control, which SID is playing on which channel. Then we got hotkey L switches off and on the light. Then hotkey R is a reset. Then with hotkey S we can save the current configuration so that you have a certain configuration on boot up. Then with hotkey W we can set a password, and this is very interesting in conjunction with the feature hotkey X, where we can kind of enable a keyboard lock. So you can set this computer into lock mode so that nobody can enter some things on the computer itself. Then we got this help screen, what we can see here right now. And in addition to this, we got a features page as well, where we have listed all the modification we have done on this C64. And we're going to see them in hardware as well, but I briefly go to explain some of them already. So as mentioned, we got this twin SID adapter called Mixsid. We got this Keyman 64, which controls all the functions we have seen so far. The overlay 64 is responsible for bringing all those information onto the screen so that we can have this feedback while changing configuration of the Mixsid, for example. And therefore you have some, well, indicator that you have pressed some keys that something has changed. Then we have installed a Modulator Mod, so we replaced the original modulator, and we have installed an AC64, which is a power supply that's built into the C64, and therefore you have the chance to either run it on a standard C64 power supply, or you can use a 9-volt EC power supply, and which is simply available at different web pages, MSN for example, all that stuff. And therefore you are not you do not have to use the original C64 power supply anymore. And then we got a small USB hub, which is for the programming of the overlay and the keyman, with a small USB connector here in the corner. We have the so-called Superkernal 36-in-1 plus Wi-Fi, and this is a kernel replacement with a lot of more functions than just being a kernel replacement. And we even can connect over Wi-Fi to an FTP server, for example. We got this case from a Plexi Laser, as I mentioned at the very beginning, and we have a total rework of the board. So most of the components are replaced by SMD components. I did a full recap of the board, and almost all of the ICs are placed onto sockets. There's just one missing, and that's one of the reasons why I got this back, because we want to change this now as well. And we placed heatsink on almost all of the ICs, even if this makes perhaps not that much sense for certain ICs, but for the sake of the visual aspect, we decided to do this for all ICs so that it looks more even. So basically this is an overview of the features we have seen here so far, and now I think I'm going to dig into the mechanical aspect, the electronic aspect, and therefore I think we're going to brighten up the scene a little bit, and just to be on the safe side, I'm going to switch off the C64 so that we're not going to break something. And as a first step, we have to get off the lid so that we can have a better view on the internals of this C64. I really have to pay attention that I keep all the screws together, so I'm not going to lose them. So as I said, this case is built for the longer boards or the bigger boards, the larger boards, and interestingly it can be used for all versions. And the benefit of having this bigger case with a smaller board is that we can see the whole main board, and that we got some additional space just below the keyboard to add all the components I have mentioned so far, as long as they are not located on the main board anyway. So first step is done. And here we can see that really all the ICs are equipped with heatsinks, except for the one here on the modulator, which is something we may do as well. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit, so I hope you have no motion sickness or something like this, because I really have to readjust the focus a little bit. So bring it back to center. Now we can see that all those standard components, which are basically through the whole components originally, have been replaced by SMD components, so the rectifiers, the capacitors, and all that small resistors. I just kept a few of the original components because they are either not available as SMD components, or they are really critical for the system. And therefore we really had to stick to this old-fashioned capacitors, for example, and some protection capacitors or rectifiers or something like this. We've replaced these components here as well. Functionally it's the very same, they just look better. And as I said, we established a couple of LEDs on the board as well, like on this side, like here, this one and this one. They indicate the different voltage levels available on the board. And I had to modify the power switch as well to make the C64 to work. And basically this is just protection for transportation. And we just want to play safe, and therefore we had some kind of supporting material here in between. And basically the configuration of the Mixsid is mostly done by the Keyman64, except for the type of SID. This is nothing you change from the outside anyway. So we kept the jumpers here, and we just wired those configuration block to the Keyman64. And what I've mentioned as well is the Superkernal 36 in 1, which is indeed a very strange name, with the Wi-Fi adapter connected to it, and therefore you are able to either update the firmware or download software from an FTP server, for example, and you can even launch, let's say, games from an FTP server by using the Wi-Fi option. And as previously mentioned, this is the USB connector, so that we can connect from the outside, and then we can program or reconfigure the keyman and overlay as well. This is more comfortable than disassembling this whole C64 every time you want to change something. And I implemented a small USB hub because those devices are basically not connected to each other by USB. And now we got a chance to access both of them from the outside. And this is indeed very comfortable. So I think this is basically all we have done on the board so far. This case, and I'm going to just to zoom out a little bit as well. I'll put it back into center. The case actually is straight indeed. It looks just through my lens a little bit, well, fish eye-like. So this case is delivered with one LED strip just below the keyboard on this place here. and we decided just to extend this. So this is going to be going around the whole case and creates a more equal distributed, a more even light experience. So as the next thing, we're going to remove the cover for the keyboard and then the keyboard itself. And here we really have to pay attention because this is a different type of screws, so that we really place them back onto the keyboard section later on. So as you may have mentioned, that the rework of the board itself took really a long time. So basically I started with a broken 469 board, and at the end it was just one broken RAM IC, but therefore it was really a good idea just to go through all the components, and just for the purpose of having a clean visual aspect of the board, we had the idea to change this to SMD. That's probably something I'm not going to do again, because it was really an awful amount of work. It's more than 50 components on the board. I even found a mistake in the Commodore maintenance manual. There's a part list, a bill of material, and 2 capacitors had the wrong value in there, and this renders the board unusable. And fortunately in the schematics you can find the right value, and I was able to track this down, and this whole thing started to work again. So this is just some kind of cover, and here we can see this additional LED light, and this has been connected by some kind of jumper lines so that we can remove the parts here as well. And that's going to be the same on this side. And then I think we have to remove this parts here as well, to dig even a little bit deeper into this case. So this case is really something that looks very gorgeous on your desk. It's not meant for frequent transportation, because mechanical wise it is not as solid as the original cases. But if you really just put this in a kind of transportation case, or a, well, let's say some more rigid carton box or something like this, then you can even carry this to your parties or whatever you're going to do so. And now we're going to lift the keyboard off, and as you can see, there's a whole set of additional components here as well. Just going to remove the keyboard cable. So you may notice that I have changed the keyboard cable as well, because we do not require this original long keyboard cable anymore, because we just need to come to this place, and therefore I shortened the cable as well, including a whole cleaning and finishing of the keyboard as well. So I disassembled the whole keyboard, and for the detail loving fans of you, this is basically a new style keyboard. So this comes basically with bright keys, but we wanted to have the black keys, but unfortunately the older keyboards have a different shift lock switch here, which is deeper than this one, and this certain type of case has a keyboard mount, especially here on this place, so the old style keyboard won't fit to this case. So I replaced all the keys of a newer keyboard with the old keys, just to achieve the optics here. And let's go through all the parts here. as well. So as mentioned, this is the core of this whole control system. This is the Keyman 64, which processes all the key presses we have added to the hotkey function. And this is connected to the overlay 64, which produces the, well, obviously overlay on the C64 screen, so that you have some visual feedback. Basically, for the whole operation, this is not required. This is just an addition, and this whole system works with the Keyman itself as well. The Keyman itself has a couple of control lines, and as you can see, we haven't used all of them, and we can even add more functions to it to control other things as well. And basically that's all about this thingy here. And as you can see, there's a lot of wiring required. And in opposition to a former project I've done with Keyman overlay as well, where I've used a lot of this kind of male-female connector cables, I went for this flat style cables, and this has worked quite okay-ish. But the thing is that the grid is different, so you really have to spread the cables every time you're going to connect this to a line of pins like this. And therefore it was really a lot of work to get all the cables lined. And you can see that the keyboard cable here is going under the board and is connected directly from the bottom of the board. And on the very left hand side we have this USB hub, which I have mentioned already. So this is connected to the overlay and the Keyman, and therefore we can use the USB connection in conjunction with a Linux or Windows PC to program those two devices. And those two devices are powered by Amiga ICs or microcontrollers. And it's indeed a bit funny that the CPU power combined in those two devices heavily exceeds the CPU power of the C64. So it's very interesting to see that a lot of components added to the C64 are really more powerful than the core unit itself. But it's very interesting to see how those devices improving the whole experience with the C64 as well. And well, last but not least, this is the mentioned AC64. This is some kind of well, power supply without the power source itself, but it is able to convert 9V AC to the required 9V AC for the C64 and 5V DC, and therefore you can use a either 9V AC power supply or the original C64 power supply. Then it switches, and we got some LED lights here as well, and they indicate what type of power supply we are using right now. I do not have this 9V AC power supply here for demonstration, but it is very cheap and you can easily get this different online sources. And this was kind of a batch order story at the Forum 64, as usual, most of the things. And I think it's not available anymore, but as far as I remember, this is open source, so this can be kind of reproduced as well. And I have to check whether the PCB is available as a open source or as a however file, so that it can be reproduced. And this is indeed a very interesting project, because first you got the flexibility of using two different PSUs, which is very nice. And especially if you have to keep in mind that those older PSUs, the original PSUs, they really tend to die. And most of the time they die, they really kill the C64 as well. So it's really a good idea just to replace them at all. And unfortunately, replacement PSUs are, well, pretty expensive. I mean, most of them are really worth the money. I really have to mentioned Ray Carlson's PSUs, for example. Very good quality, very reliable. I'm using them as well, and doing a tremendous job and have a very nice design. But they are indeed a bit pricey. But anyway, if we go for a standard 9-volt AC 2 ampere PSU, then in combination with the AC64, then you're all set as well. That's a very solid construction and it works very well. So basically that's already all we have done on this board. I think I haven't got something to mention. So if you may wonder about this strange shade here on the bottom, this is just because we have some protection foil on the bottom of the case, and you can see it through the case. So this is not a design of this whole thing. And just as a small outlook, what we're going to change is, as mentioned, I'm going to put a socket under the so-called Super PLA. This was something I couldn't get done because I was not able to get the matching socket for it. We're going to change the lighting a little bit because we want to have some more effects implemented so that it looks more fancy, more 80-ish perhaps. And we're going to update the SIDs as well. The first idea was to use an FPGA SID, but the FPGA SID is a very nice device without any doubt, but it is very hard to control this by the Keyman 64, for example. And we want to keep this functionality that you are, wherever you are right now, whether playing a game, playing a demo or something like this, that you are able to change the configuration of the Keyman 64 on the fly, which is not possible, or with one exception, with the FPGA SID. The FPGA SID can store 2 different configurations and they can switch on the fly as well, and this can be done by the Keyman as well. But having the chance to changing channel configuration, changing the SID type and all that things, the Mixsid is indeed a bit more advanced. And we're going to replace the original SIDs by Ultimate, the SwinSID Ultimate, because this is a very nice device as well, and it has LEDs, so you have some flashing lights in different colors on your Mixsid as well, which matches the style of this whole project very well, I think. So basically, I think that's all I have to say about this one. I hope you had some fun watching the video as well. If you have any questions, details, technical wise about this whole project, feel free to use the comment section and ask whatever you want to know. And I'm more than willing to at least try to answer everything as best as possible. I will add the links to the different sources for the components as long as they are available, or at least to the info pages into the description. Always forget description, so that you can follow up most of the things here as well. And as soon as I have made some progress with the new features, with the update of this whole thing, I think I'm going to release a new video to present the kind of final stage of the project, and perhaps to have some, let's say, work state in between, or well, building videos implemented as well. So enough chatting. That's all I want to say about this one. As usual, thank you very much for watching, and feel free, as I said, to use the comment section. Feel free to subscribe if you haven't done so, and see you for the next video. Bye bye.